The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet afternoon in Greeley, Colorado, and Rebecca Edwards stumbled backward into the dusty street, her carpetbag splitting open at her feet to scatter papers across the ground like autumn leaves. The proprietor of the boarding house stood in his doorway, face red with indignation, pointing one thick finger at her retreating form while shouting about decent establishments and proper Christian women. It was August of 1878, and Rebecca had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach this frontier town, expecting to find refuge with a distant cousin who had supposedly settled here years ago. Instead, she had found an empty lot where the cousin's home should have been, and a series of increasingly hostile rejections from every boarding house and hotel in town. The problem, she was beginning to understand, was not just that she was a woman traveling alone. It was that she looked too old to be unmarried, too refined to be without prospects, and too mysterious to be trusted. She was 34 years old, which meant she had long passed the age when most women were expected to have established households and families. Her dark hair, pulled back in a simple bun, showed threads of silver at the temples. Her face bore the fine lines of someone who had lived through hardship and come out the other side with her dignity intact. She wore a traveling dress of deep blue that had seen better days, but she carried herself with a quiet grace that spoke of education and breeding. As she knelt to gather her scattered belongings, rough hands reached down to help. She looked up into a face weathered by sun and wind, framed by sandy hair that curled slightly at the collar of a worn shirt. The man crouching beside her had eyes the color of storm clouds, and when he handed her a bundle of letters, his smile was gentle. "Madam," he said, his voice carrying the slow drawl of someone who chose his words carefully, "you look like you could use some assistance." Rebecca took the letters, her fingers brushing his calloused palm. "Thank you, but I have caused enough disruption for one day. I will manage." The man stood, offering his hand to help her up. She hesitated only a moment before accepting. He was tall, she realized, taller than she had first thought, with broad shoulders that came from years of hard work. He wore dusty chaps over denim trousers, and a bandana hung loosely around his neck. A cowboy, clearly, though something in his bearing suggested he was more than just a ranch hand. "Franklin Walsh," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I own a spread about 5 miles north of town. Heard the commotion and thought I might lend a hand." "Rebecca Edwards," she replied, brushing dust from her skirts. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Walsh, though I fear my situation is beyond the help of good manners." Franklin studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You are looking for lodging." "I was. It seems my cousin, whom I traveled here to find, departed Greeley some years ago, and no one saw fit to inform me. I have contacted every establishment in town, and none will have me." She said this matter-of-factly, without self-pity, though Franklin could hear the exhaustion beneath her words. "Why not?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rebecca met his eyes directly. "Because I am a woman of a certain age traveling alone with no husband and no clear prospects. Because I do not fit into the neat categories that frontier towns prefer. Because I make people uncomfortable in ways they cannot quite articulate." Franklin picked up her damaged carpetbag, examining the torn handle. "You are honest, at least. That is worth something." "Honesty is one of the few luxuries I can still afford," Rebecca said with a slight smile that did not quite reach her eyes. A crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the earlier disturbance. Franklin could feel their eyes on them both, and he knew how quickly gossip spread in a town like Greeley. He made a decision that surprised even himself. "My ranch has a foreman's cottage that has been empty since old Josiah retired last spring. It is small but clean, with a good stove and a well nearby. You are welcome to stay there while you figure out your next steps." Rebecca stared at him. "Mr. Walsh, I cannot possibly accept such an offer. Your reputation would be ruined, and mine, such as it is, would be utterly destroyed." "My reputation can withstand a little gossip," Franklin said easily. "And as for yours, well, it seems folks around here have already made up their minds regardless of the truth. Sometimes the only thing to do is live your life and let them talk." She wanted to refuse. Every bit of propriety she had been taught demanded that she refuse. But she was tired, so very tired, and she had nowhere else to go. The money she had saved for this journey was nearly gone, spent on train tickets and stage fare and meals along the way. She had perhaps enough left for one night in a cheap hotel, if she could find one that would take her, and then what? "I will work for my keep," she said finally. "I am educated. I can read and write and cipher. I have kept household accounts and managed staff. I can cook and sew and tend a garden. I will not be a burden." Franklin's smile broadened, and Rebecca noticed for the first time that it transformed his whole face, chasing away the weariness she had initially seen there. "I believe you, Miss Edwards. Come on, then. My horse is tied up at the mercantile. We can ride out before this crowd decides to get any more invested in our business." He loaded her meager belongings onto his horse, a sturdy bay mare with intelligent eyes, and helped Rebecca mount in front of him. It was improper, of course, sharing a horse with a man she had just met, but propriety seemed like a small concern compared to basic survival. As they rode through the dusty streets of Greeley, Rebecca felt the weight of dozens of stares following them, but Franklin seemed unconcerned, guiding the mare with easy confidence. The ride out to the ranch took nearly an hour. The landscape was vast and open, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance like jagged teeth against the sky. Grassland rolled away in every direction, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood trees that marked the presence of water. The air was clean and sharp, scented with sage and dust, and something else Rebecca could not quite name. Something wild and free. Franklin's ranch, when they reached it, was more substantial than she had expected. The main house was built of solid timber with a wide porch that wrapped around two sides. Several outbuildings stood nearby, including a large barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, their forms small against the immensity of the land. The foreman's cottage sat a comfortable distance from the main house, close enough to be convenient but far enough to provide privacy. It was indeed small, just 2 rooms, but it was well built and recently whitewashed. Franklin dismounted and helped Rebecca down, then pushed open the door to reveal a tidy interior. The main room held a small table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the stone fireplace, and a narrow bed against one wall. The second room was barely more than a closet, but it held shelves and a washstand. Everything was clean, if a bit dusty from disuse. "Josiah kept it neat," Franklin said, setting down her carpetbag. "He was particular that way. I have been meaning to hire a new foreman, but good men are hard to find, and I have been managing well enough on my own with the help of a couple of ranch hands." Rebecca walked slowly around the space, touching the back of the rocking chair, running her fingers along the edge of the table. "It is more than adequate, Mr. Walsh. It is generous. I do not know how to thank you properly." "No need for thanks," Franklin said. "Just make yourself at home. I will have one of the men bring over some supplies from the main house, enough to get you started. Tomorrow we can talk about what work you might do to earn your keep, though I will tell you straight that I am not in the habit of working my guests like hired help." "I am not your guest," Rebecca said firmly. I am someone you have kindly offered shelter to, and I will repay that kindness with work. I insist on it, Mr. Walsh. I have my pride, even if I have little else." Franklin studied her for a long moment, and Rebecca had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing far more than she intended to reveal. "All right, then," he said finally. "We will figure something out. But for tonight, just rest. You look like you have been traveling hard." After he left, Rebecca sat in the rocking chair and allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to simply breathe. The afternoon light slanted through the small window, painting golden rectangles on the wooden floor. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing, men calling to each other, the rhythmic sound of someone chopping wood. It was peaceful in a way she had not experienced in years. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking softly on the door. She stood, smoothing her skirts, and opened it to find a young man, barely out of his teens, holding a wooden crate filled with provisions. "Mr. Walsh sent these, madam," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "There is bread and butter, some eggs, coffee, salt pork, and beans. Also some firewood for your stove." "Thank you," Rebecca said, taking the crate. "What is your name?" "Tom, madam, Tom Brennan. I am one of the hands here." "It is nice to meet you, Tom. I am Rebecca Edwards. I hope we will work well together." Tom nodded quickly and retreated, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual situation. Rebecca watched him go, then carried the crate inside and began to unpack it. True to the young man's word, it contained everything she would need for several days. There was even a small jar of honey and a package wrapped in brown paper that proved to contain fresh cookies, still slightly warm. That night, Rebecca cooked herself a simple meal of eggs and bread, then sat in the rocking chair and watched the sun set through her window. The sky turned colors she had no names for, shades of orange and pink and purple that seemed impossible. That made her chest ache with something she could not quite identify. She thought about the strange turn her life had taken, how a single act of kindness from a stranger had changed everything in the span of a few hours. She thought about Franklin Walsh, with his storm-gray eyes and his easy smile, and wondered what had prompted him to help her. Men did not usually offer assistance without expecting something in return, at least not in her experience. But he had seemed genuine, and there had been no calculation in his expression, no hidden agenda that she could detect. The next morning, she woke early, washed as best she could with the water from the pitcher on the washstand, and dressed in her most practical clothing, a simple brown skirt and white blouse. She braided her hair and pinned it up, then ventured outside to explore her new surroundings. The ranch was already bustling with activity. Several men were working in the corrals, breaking horses or mending tack. Others were heading out to check on the cattle in the far pastures. Rebecca made her way toward the main house, intending to find Franklin and discuss her duties. She found him on the porch, going over a ledger with a pair of spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and smiled. "Miss Edwards, I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you. Better than I have in weeks, if I am being honest." She climbed the porch steps and gestured to the ledger. "Are those your ranch accounts?" "They are," Franklin said, removing his spectacles. "I am afraid bookkeeping is not my strongest skill. I can manage cattle and horses well enough, but numbers on a page give me trouble." Rebecca felt a flutter of excitement. "May I see?" He handed over the ledger, and she spent several minutes studying the entries. They were not terrible exactly, but they were disorganized, with income and expenses mixed together haphazardly, and some calculations that did not quite add up. "I could fix this," she said. "I could organize your accounts properly, track your expenses by category, project your income for the coming months. It would give you a much clearer picture of how the ranch is performing." Franklin leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You really do know your way around numbers." "My father was a banker in Philadelphia," Rebecca said. "He believed daughters should be educated just as thoroughly as sons. I learned bookkeeping at his knee, and I managed his household accounts for years before he died." "What brought you west?" Franklin asked gently. Rebecca closed the ledger carefully. "The same thing that brings most people west. I needed a fresh start. After my father died, there was nothing left for me in Philadelphia. The bank went to his business partner, the house had to be sold to pay debts, and I was left with very little. My cousin had written to me years ago about Greeley, about the opportunities here for people willing to work hard. It seemed like my best option. I am sorry about your father." "Thank you. It was 3 years ago now. I have had time to grieve." She met his eyes. "I do not need pity, Mr. Walsh. I need work and purpose. If you will let me organize your accounts, I will do it well, and I can help with other things too. Your house could use a woman's touch, if you do not mind my saying so." Franklin laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "My house could use a great many things. I have been batching it for years, and I am afraid it shows, but I do not want you to feel obligated to play housekeeper." "I am obligated to earn my keep," Rebecca said firmly. "You have given me shelter and food. The least I can do is make myself useful." They worked out an arrangement that morning. Rebecca would manage the ranch accounts and help with household tasks at the main house, cooking meals for Franklin and any hands who needed feeding, keeping things clean and organized. In return, she would have the cottage, meals, and a small wage that Franklin insisted on despite her protests. Over the following weeks, Rebecca settled into a rhythm. She rose early each morning and made her way to the main house, where she would prepare breakfast for Franklin and any hands who were working close to the house that day. After breakfast, she would spend several hours working on the accounts, organizing receipts, tracking expenses, and creating clear reports that showed Franklin exactly where his money was going. The afternoons were spent on household tasks, mending clothes, preserving food, cleaning rooms that had not seen proper attention in years. She discovered that Franklin's house was actually quite beautiful beneath the layers of dust and bachelor neglect. The furniture was well made, the windows large and bright, and someone had clearly put thought into the design. "My mother chose most of this," Franklin told her one afternoon as she was polishing a handsome oak sideboard. "She and my father built this place when they first came to Colorado, back in '59 during the gold rush. They had dreams of striking it rich, but my father was better with cattle than with a pickaxe. He started the ranch instead, and my mother made this house a home." "Where are they now?" Rebecca asked. "Gone. My father died in '72 during a particularly harsh winter. My mother followed him a year later. She just seemed to give up without him. I inherited the ranch and I have been running it ever since. No siblings. I had a younger sister, but she died of fever when we were children. It has just been me for a long time now." Rebecca heard the loneliness in his voice, the same loneliness she felt echoing in her own chest. "It is hard being alone," she said softly. "It is," Franklin agreed. "But it is what I know." As the days turned into weeks, Rebecca found herself thinking about Franklin Walsh more than she probably should. He was unfailingly kind, always respectful, and he treated her like an equal rather than a charity case or a servant. He asked her opinion on ranch matters, listened carefully to her suggestions about improving efficiency, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and ideas. She also noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. There was admiration in those looks and something else, something warmer that made her heart beat a little faster, For her part, Rebecca had to admit that she was drawn to him in ways she had not expected. It was not just his appearance, though she found him increasingly attractive as she got to know him. It was his quiet competence, his integrity, the way he treated his workers with fairness and respect. It was the way he could spend an entire morning breaking a wild horse with infinite patience, then sit down and listen to her explain a complex accounting problem with the same focused attention. One evening in early October, Rebecca was in the kitchen of the main house preparing dinner when Franklin came in from the range earlier than usual. He was covered in dust and looked exhausted. "Rough day?" she asked, stirring the pot of stew that had been simmering on the stove. "Long day," he corrected, washing his hands in the basin by the door. "We found a section of fence down on the north pasture, and it took most of the afternoon to repair it. Lost a few head of cattle through the gap, but we managed to round them up before they got too far." Rebecca ladled stew into a bowl and set it on the table, then cut several thick slices of the bread she had baked that morning. "Sit down before you fall down. You look ready to collapse." Franklin obeyed, settling into his chair with a grateful sigh. He took a bite of the stew and closed his eyes. "This is wonderful. You are a fine cook, Miss Edwards." "Rebecca," she said, "we have been working together for over a month now. I think we can dispense with the formalities." He smiled at her, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. "Only if you call me Franklin." "Mr. Walsh makes me feel like an old man." "You are not old," Rebecca said, sitting down across from him with her own bowl. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" 31, Franklin said. "And you?" Rebecca hesitated, then decided on honesty. They had built their relationship on truth so far. No point in changing that now. 34. "I am older than you expected, probably." Franklin set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "Rebecca, I knew you were older than the usual young ladies who come west looking for husbands from the moment I saw you. It did not matter then, and it does not matter now." "It matters to most people," she said quietly. "I am too old to be unmarried, too old to have children, most likely. Too old to be considered desirable." Franklin reached across the table and took her hand, and the gesture was so unexpected that she nearly pulled away. But his grip was warm and gentle, and she found herself holding on instead. "Let me tell you something," he said. "I have known plenty of young women in my life. Pretty girls with smooth skin and bright eyes who did not have a sensible thought in their heads. I have watched men chase after youth and beauty, only to find themselves saddled with wives who could not hold a conversation beyond the latest gossip or manage a household budget to save their lives." He squeezed her hand gently. "You are intelligent, capable, and strong. You have lived enough life to know who you are and what you want. You do not play games or put on false airs. You are honest and direct, and you have brought more order and peace to my life in 6 weeks than I have known in years. If you think I care that you have a few gray hairs or lines on your face, you are very much mistaken." Rebecca felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You hardly know me, Franklin." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know that you wake before dawn every day and work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know that you treat my ranch hands with respect, even young Tom who can barely string 2 words together around women. I know that you have transformed my house from a bachelor's dusty refuge into an actual home. I know that you are kind and patient, and that you have a laugh that makes me want to hear it again and again." "I am older than you," she said, though her heart was pounding now. "People will talk." "People always talk," Franklin said. "Let them." "Rebecca, I am not a young man anymore either. I am 31 years old, and I have been running this ranch alone for 6 years. I have had plenty of opportunities to court younger women if that was what I wanted. But I never met anyone who felt like a true partner until you walked into my life. You took me in out of kindness, Rebecca said, but her voice wavered. Out of pity, perhaps. I took you in because something in me recognized something in you, Franklin said. And every day since then has confirmed that my instinct was right. I am not asking for anything you are not willing to give, Rebecca. But I think you should know that I have come to care for you very much. And if you could possibly feel the same way about me, well, I would count myself the luckiest man in Colorado. Rebecca looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between her smaller fingers and his work-roughened palms. She thought about all the years she had spent alone, all the times she had been told she was too old, too independent, too unmarriageable. She thought about the kindness Franklin had shown her from the very first moment, and the way he had never once made her feel like a burden or a charity case. I do feel the same way, she said finally, looking up to meet his eyes. I have tried not to because it seemed like foolishness, but I cannot help it. You have been nothing but good to me, Franklin, and somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my employer and started seeing you as someone I could not imagine living without. Franklin's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He stood, still holding her hand, and drew her up to face him. Rebecca Edwards, I know this is sudden, and I know we have only known each other a short time, but I am not a patient man when I know what I want, and I want you. I want to wake up every morning and see you in my kitchen. I want to sit across from you at the dinner table and hear about your day. I want to grow old with you and count every gray hair as a blessing because it means we have had more time together. He reached up with his free hand and cupped her cheek gently. Would you consider marrying me? Not because you need shelter or security, but because you want to build a life with me the same way I want to build one with you. Rebecca's tears finally spilled over, but they were good tears, healing tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Franklin, I will marry you. He kissed her then, soft and gentle, a promise of all the kisses to come. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. We should do it soon, Franklin said, before the snows come. I want you in my house properly, as my wife, not hidden away in the foreman's cottage like some secret I am ashamed of. I have been comfortable in the cottage, Rebecca said, but she was laughing. Well, I have not been comfortable, Franklin said firmly. Do you know how hard it has been, knowing you are sleeping just a few hundred yards away? How many times I have wanted to walk over there and tell you exactly how I feel, consequences be damned. Rebecca reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. Then let us not wait. Let us marry as soon as we can arrange it. They were married 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning with the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides. The ceremony was held in Greeley's small church, and while some of the townspeople who had rejected Rebecca so coldly weeks earlier attended out of curiosity, many more came because they had seen how happy Franklin Walsh looked these days, and they were glad for him. Rebecca wore a new dress of deep green wool that Franklin had insisted on buying for her, despite her protests about the expense. Her hair was arranged in a soft style that showed off the silver threads she had once tried to hide, and she carried a simple bouquet of late-season wildflowers that Franklin had picked himself that morning. When the minister asked Franklin to speak his vows, he looked directly into Rebecca's eyes and said, I promise to honor you, to respect you, and to stand beside you as your partner in all things. I promise to value your wisdom and your strength, and to remind you every day that you are precious to me. Rebecca's own vows were equally heartfelt. I promise to be your companion and your friend, to share in your joys and your burdens, and to build with you a home filled with love and laughter. I promise to bring all of myself to this marriage, holding nothing back." The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn that had been swept clean and decorated with pine boughs and ribbon. Tom Brennan and the other ranch hands had worked for days to prepare the space, and their pride in the result was evident. There was food and music, and even some of the stiff townspeople unbent enough to congratulate the happy couple. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Franklin led Rebecca into the main house, into the bedroom that had been his alone but was now theirs together. He had cleaned it thoroughly and put fresh linens on the bed, and there were flowers in a vase on the dresser. "I want you to know," he said softly, taking her hands, "that there is no rush. We have the rest of our lives together. Whatever happens tonight or any night, I want you to feel safe and cherished." Rebecca kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. "I do feel safe," she said. "For the first time in years, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a gradual discovery of each other that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, lying in Franklin's arms, Rebecca thought about how strangely life could turn. Just 2 months ago, she had been alone and desperate, rejected by a town that could not see past her age. Now she was married to a good man, living in a beautiful place, with a future stretching out before her that held promise and joy. "What are you thinking about?" Franklin murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "About how unexpected happiness can be," Rebecca said. "About how you changed my entire life with one simple act of kindness." "It was not entirely selfless," Franklin admitted. "I took one look at you standing in that street, dusty and defiant and refusing to let those small-minded people break you, and I thought, there is a woman worth knowing. There is a woman who has survived things I cannot even imagine and come out stronger for it." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. "I am glad you took that chance on me. Best decision I ever made," Franklin said, kissing her forehead. "Wisdom is worth more than youth, Rebecca. I have learned that the hard way. And you have more wisdom in your little finger than most people accumulate in a lifetime." The winter that followed was cold but joyful. Rebecca threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, not just for herself and Franklin, but for the men who worked for them. She established a regular schedule of meals in the main house for anyone who wanted to join them, and she made sure the bunkhouse was stocked with warm blankets and medical supplies. She continued to manage the ranch accounts, and under her careful oversight, Franklin began to see profits that he had never managed before. She helped him plan for the future, suggesting investments and improvements that would make the ranch more efficient and productive. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, Franklin reading the newspaper while Rebecca worked on her sewing, and they would talk about everything and nothing. They discussed politics and philosophy, shared stories from their pasts, and made plans for the years to come. In February, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She was shocked at first, having believed herself past the age of childbearing, but the doctor in Greeley confirmed it. When she told Franklin, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Are you happy?" she asked, slightly dizzy from the spinning and the magnitude of the news. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Franklin said. "Rebecca, I never thought I would have a family of my own. I had made my peace with it, or so I thought. But now, to know that we are going to have a child together, it feels like a miracle." "I am frightened," Rebecca admitted. "I am older and the risks are greater. What if something goes wrong?" Franklin pulled her close. "Then we will face it together, just like we face everything else." "But I have faith, Rebecca. You are strong and our child will be strong, and whatever happens, we have each other." The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca struggled with fatigue and nausea in the early months, and Franklin worried constantly, hovering over her until she had to shoo him away to get any work done. But as spring arrived and her belly began to round, she found herself filled with a fierce joy that surprised her. She had never thought she would be a mother. She had made peace with that loss years ago, or so she believed. But now, feeling the baby move inside her, she realized how much she had secretly longed for this. A child to love and raise, a tangible symbol of the life she and Franklin were building together. The baby came in late September, after a long and difficult labor that left Franklin pacing anxiously outside the bedroom while the doctor and a midwife tended to Rebecca. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door, protocol be damned, and rushed to Rebecca's side. She was exhausted and pale, but she was smiling as she held the small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "A boy," she said softly. "We have a son, Franklin." Franklin looked down at the tiny face, the eyes screwed shut and the mouth open in a wail of protest at being thrust into the cold world. He felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for this gift." They named him Samuel, after Franklin's father, and he was everything they could have hoped for. He was healthy and strong, with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire ranch. Rebecca recovered slowly from the birth, but with Franklin's devoted care and the help of several women from town who had softened toward her over the months, she regained her strength. Motherhood at 35 was different than it might have been at 25, Rebecca reflected one morning as she nursed Samuel while Franklin made breakfast. Her body recovered more slowly, and she tired more easily. But she also had patience and wisdom that a younger woman might have lacked. She did not panic at every small thing, and she trusted her instincts in a way she might not have when she was younger. "You are a natural mother," Franklin said, watching her with their son. "I knew you would be." "I have help," Rebecca said with a smile. "You are as devoted to him as any father could be. I have seen you up at night, walking him when he fusses, changing his diapers without complaint." "He is my son," Franklin said simply. "It is my privilege to care for him." As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Franklin's careful management, combined with Rebecca's organizational skills, made their operation one of the most successful in the region. They were able to hire more hands, expand their herds, and invest in improvements that made their life easier. But more than material success, they built something even more valuable. They built a home filled with love and laughter, a place where people felt welcome and valued. The ranch became known as a good place to work, and Franklin and Rebecca as fair and generous employers. When Samuel was 3 years old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the surprise was less profound, but the joy was no less intense. Franklin was delighted, and Samuel, though he did not quite understand what was happening, seemed to sense that something exciting was coming. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Rebecca knew what to expect, or perhaps because her body, having done it once, remembered how. She continued to work throughout, managing the household and the accounts, though Franklin insisted she rest more and delegate some of the heavier tasks. In the spring of 1883, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter. Franklin was present this time, holding Rebecca's hand through the labor, and when the baby was placed in his arms, tears ran unashamedly down his face. "A daughter," he said wonderingly. "Rebecca, we have a daughter." They named her Catherine after Rebecca's mother, and she was as different from Samuel as night from day. Where he had been loud and vigorous, she was quiet and observant. Where he had resisted sleep, she dozed peacefully for hours. But she was just as loved, just as cherished. Over the next several years, Franklin and Rebecca watched their children grow. Samuel was a born rancher, following his father around from the time he could walk, asking endless questions about horses and cattle and the land. Catherine was more bookish, showing her mother's love of learning. She would sit for hours with Rebecca, looking at picture books and later learning to read far earlier than most children. In 1885, when Rebecca was 41 and Franklin was 38, they welcomed a third child, another son they named James. This birth was harder than the previous two, and afterward, the doctor told them gently that Rebecca should not have any more children. The risk to her health was simply too great. Rebecca grieved a little for the children she would never have, but when she looked at her 3 healthy, happy babies, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure. She had a husband who loved her deeply, children who filled her days with purpose and joy, and a home that was everything she had ever dreamed of. Franklin, for his part, was content. He had his family, his ranch, and the deep satisfaction of work well done. He watched his children grow and his wife flourish, and he thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Rebecca into his life that August day in Greeley. One evening, when James was 2 and the older children were playing outside in the last light of summer, Franklin and Rebecca sat together on the porch swing they had installed the previous year. Rebecca leaned against her husband's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Marrying someone older, missing out on the chance to have a younger wife who could have given you more children, who would not have gray hair by 40. Franklin turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Rebecca, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have never, not for one single moment, regretted marrying you. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible. 3 beautiful children, yes, but more than that. You have given me a true partnership, a meeting of minds and hearts that I did not even know I wanted until I found it." He reached up and touched her hair, now liberally streaked with silver. "These gray hairs are beautiful to me. They represent your strength and your wisdom. They represent the life you lived before me and the life we have built together. If I could go back to that day in Greeley and choose differently, if I could have any woman in the world, young or old, beautiful or plain, I would still choose you. Every time, I would choose you." Rebecca felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you, Franklin Walsh. You saved me in more ways than I can count." "We saved each other," Franklin said, kissing her softly. "And we will keep saving each other every day for as long as we live." The years continued to pass, measured in seasons and harvests, in birthdays and holidays, in the steady accumulation of small joys and occasional sorrows. Samuel grew into a tall, capable young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations, eventually becoming his father's true partner in running the place. Catherine, brilliant and determined, became a teacher in Greeley, educating the next generation of frontier children. James, the baby, showed a talent for business and helped expand the ranch's operations into new territories. Franklin and Rebecca grew old together gracefully. Franklin's hair turned silver to match Rebecca's, and the lines on both their faces deepened. But their love, far from fading with time, only grew stronger and more profound. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had buried parents and friends, survived harsh winters and economic downturns, raised children through illnesses and accidents and all the normal trials of growing up. Through it all, they had remained true partners, facing every challenge side by side. They still sat together on the porch swing on summer evenings, still shared their thoughts and dreams and fears. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. On their 25th wedding anniversary, in October of 1903, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music. At one point in the evening, Franklin pulled Rebecca aside to a quiet corner. 25 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Where did the time go? Into our life, Rebecca said simply. Into our children and our work and our love for each other. It went exactly where it was supposed to go. Franklin took her hands, holding them as he had that night when he first proposed. You were older than I expected, he said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. But wisdom is worth more than youth, and you have taught me that truth every day of our marriage. You saw me, Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. When no one else would, when I was certain I would spend the rest of my life alone, you saw me. Not my age, not my circumstances, but me. The person I actually am, and you chose me anyway. I chose you because of who you are, Franklin corrected gently. Your age was never a drawback, Rebecca. It was part of what made you perfect for me. You had lived enough life to know your own mind, to be confident in yourself, to bring real partnership to our marriage. A younger woman might have given me more years together, but they would not have been as rich or as meaningful. They kissed then, in front of all their guests, a long, sweet kiss that spoke of decades of love and commitment. Their children cheered, and their grandchildren, Samuel's 2 boys and Catherine's infant daughter, clapped their small hands in delight without really understanding why. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Franklin and Rebecca stood together on their porch, watching the sun set over the mountains they had called home for a quarter century. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to their hard work and vision. We did well, did we not? Rebecca said softly. We did better than well, Franklin said. We built something real and lasting. We created a family and a legacy. We loved each other truly and raised our children to be good people. What more could we ask for? Rebecca leaned into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished as she always had with him. Nothing more. This is everything. The years continued their steady march. Franklin and Rebecca gradually stepped back from active management of the ranch, trusting Samuel and his capable wife to run things while they enjoyed their golden years. They traveled a little, visiting Catherine in Greeley and James, who had moved to Denver to expand the family's business interests. But they always came home to the ranch, to the house Franklin's parents had built and that Rebecca had transformed into a true home. They became grandparents several times over, delighting in the next generation. They passed on their wisdom and their stories, making sure their grandchildren knew where they came from and what values had built their family's success. In the winter of 1919, Franklin fell ill with pneumonia. He was 72 years old, and though he fought hard, his body was worn out from decades of hard work and hard living. Rebecca nursed him devotedly, and he passed peacefully in his sleep with her hand in his. Rebecca grieved deeply. After 41 years of marriage, losing Franklin felt like losing a part of herself. But she was sustained by her children and grandchildren, by the life they had built together, and by the knowledge that their love had been real and true and lasting. She lived another 6 years, spending them in the house she had shared with Franklin, surrounded by family and memories. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, managing the household and offering advice when asked. She watched her grandchildren grow and even welcomed several great-grandchildren. On a quiet spring morning in 1925, Rebecca Edwards Walsh passed away peacefully at the age of 81. She was laid to rest beside Franklin in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, where the mountains rose in the distance and the wind sang through the grass. Their children and grandchildren gathered around the grave, and Samuel spoke the eulogy. "My parents built something that will last long after we are all gone," he said, his voice steady despite his grief. "They built it on love and respect, on hard work and integrity, on the understanding that true partnership means accepting each other fully and completely. My father saw past my mother's age to the person she truly was, and my mother trusted him enough to build a life with him. They gave us all an example of what real love looks like, and we will carry that forward for generations to come." The ranch continued to prosper under the stewardship of the Walsh descendants. The main house was preserved and eventually designated as a historical landmark, a testament to the early ranching families who had helped build Colorado. Visitors who came to tour it would see the ledgers Rebecca had kept, filled with her neat handwriting, and the photographs on the walls showing Franklin and Rebecca at various stages of their life together. The story of how they met became family legend, passed down through the generations. How a desperate woman had been rejected by a small-minded town, and how a cowboy with wisdom beyond his years had seen her true worth. How they had built a love that lasted 4 decades, weathering every storm together. How they had proven that wisdom was indeed worth more than youth, and that real love saw past surface things to the heart beneath. In the end, Rebecca and Franklin's greatest legacy was not the successful ranch or the financial security they provided for their descendants. It was the example they set of what a true partnership could be. They had been equals from the start, respecting each other's strengths and supporting each other through weaknesses. They had chosen each other freely and loved each other completely, and that love had rippled outward, touching everyone who knew them. The cottage where Rebecca had first stayed, that small building that had been her refuge and the beginning of her new life, remained standing for over a century. Eventually, it too was restored and preserved, with a plaque telling the story of the woman who had arrived in Greeley with nothing but a torn carpetbag and a determination to survive, and the cowboy who had seen past her age to her wisdom, her strength, and her worth. Their story became a reminder that love could come at any age, in any form, to anyone brave enough to accept it. That wisdom and experience were not detriments but gifts. That the best partnerships were built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than superficial attractions. And that sometimes, the most unexpected kindness could change the course of an entire life. Rebecca had been older than Franklin expected that day in Greeley, but she had been exactly what he needed, and he had been exactly what she needed too. A man who could see her clearly, who valued her for who she was rather than rejecting her for who she was not. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a love story for the ages that proved that the truest wisdom often lies in recognizing the real value of what stands before you, regardless of what others might think or say. Their love had been tested by time and circumstance, by the harsh realities of frontier life and the narrow judgments of their peers. But it had endured and flourished, growing deeper and richer with each passing year. They had given each other the greatest gift anyone can give, the gift of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Not the ranch, not the money, not the opinions of others. Just 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other freely, and who had spent their lives proving that wisdom was indeed worth more than youth, and that real love recognized no boundaries of age or circumstance. Their story lived on, told and retold, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of true partnership, and the enduring nature of love that is built on wisdom, respect, and genuine connection. It reminded everyone who heard it that it is never too late to find love, never too late to start over, and never too late to build something beautiful with someone who sees you for who you truly are. Rebecca and Franklin Walsh had lived fully and loved completely, and their legacy of wisdom and love continued to inspire all who came after them. Proof that the best stories are not about perfect people or easy paths, but about real people who choose to see past surface things to the worth beneath, and who have the courage to build a life based on that vision.